back. After a quick Google search, I was able to find out how to install Homebrew on the Mac machine. And so, again, we want to open up our terminal prompt, and then I believe what I did was I copied this guy, and what I googled was Homebrew, or how to install Homebrew on Mac, and this was basically what showed up. And so I'm copying and pasting this into my terminal prompt. Let's see. Nope. Press return to continue, or any other key to abort. So I'm going to press return to continue, and there it goes. And so what it's basically doing is that curl is fetching the files, or appropriate files, to install Homebrew. And as you can see, it's downloading, it's installing onto your machine, and then it does its very own magic where it's updating and deleting anything that might complicate matters for the Homebrew program. And so, as you can see here, installation successful. If you do run into any problems, GitHub is or Stack Overflow, excuse me. Stack Overflow is a really great place to figure out what went wrong with the installation, and there are a lot of friendly developers out there that would happily provide you kind of solutions to why your installation failed for Homebrew. So great. You now have Homebrew installed on your machine. And the reason why we installed Homebrew is because Hadoop, as I mentioned before, was designed as a software for Windows, and so we're looking for Homebrew to install Hadoop on the Mac side. Great. So number one is basically done. You guys, we're making progress. And so the next thing we need to do is to set up a secure shell. And what this allows us to do, I believe Isaac said it best, was that it allows, it's basically a requirement for Hadoop. As you can see here, Hadoop requires a secure shell protocol. And so the first thing you want to do, that I've done already, was to change your system preferences so that you are allowing access to all users. And so let me walk you guys through that. So system preferences here. I have a software update that I need to attend to later, but let's go to sharing. And what you'll have to do, that I've done so far, is that you go to this place, remote login, you want to check that. And then what you want to do here, this is very key, or else Hadoop's not going to work later, because as I mentioned, Hadoop requires SSH, or secure shell protocol. And so before, and maybe this is on your machine now, it would say only these users. But what we want to do is we want to swap it over to all the users. And this should allow Hadoop to connect to your machine. All right, great. So now we have to set it up. So that was a prerequisite to setting up the secure shell. And so the next thing we want to do is we want to generate an RSA, or an ID underscore RSA file, which basically sort of identifies your machine, or authenticates your machine for Hadoop to work. And so this is the command that you want to punch into the terminal. So let me grab this guy. And if you have previously set up an RSA before already, I don't believe this is necessary, but just in case, I'd suggest copying this command and running it into your terminal. So let's do that. It's generating a public and private RSA key pair, enter file in which to save the key. And so before, I've done this before, and so I think what I did was I hit return because I want to save it to the default location. If you punched in another file location, you might have to locate it later. So I remember I pressed enter here, and then see, as you can see, I've already created a personal ID underscore RSA file, or in other words, I've already created the public private RSA key pair, and so I'm gonna put no. But for you, this overwrite question should not come up because ideally you guys probably have not created your own public private RSA key pair yet. So I don't think you guys will run into this problem. If I recall correctly, it asked you for a password, and for the sake of this demonstration, I would recommend not typing in the password and just pressing the enter or return button. Very cool, very cool. So that should have created a public private RSA key pair for you guys. If you are curious if that was indeed created, what you can do is you can run this command, and it basically brings us to the directory of this guy, and it allows us to see if there's a public private RSA key pair that was generated. So for moving forward, I'm just going to say RSA key pair instead of public private RSA key pair. What a mouthful. So let's see if that was indeed created. CD, if you guys are not familiar, stands for change directory. So what I'm doing here is that I'm changing the terminal directory to this file in which the key pair should have been created. And then ls, I forget what it stands for, but basically you're listing the contents of that directory in which you're in right now. And so I know for Mac, if you look up here, we're currently in the .ssh directory. So that's what I'm looking to list the contents of. And so you can see here that I have, an ID underscore RSA pub token, as well as an ID underscore RSA token. So I believe this is a private one. This one's a public one. And if you typed ls, hopefully you are able to find both of these files as well. Cool. We're almost there, guys. Hang in there. And so this next command, I'm not too familiar with what it does, but what we're doing is that, according to Isaac, our fellow data scientist, what it does for us, what he says it does for us, is that it authorizes our public key to the local to prevent passphrase requests. And so I think what happens is that if we were to run Hadoop, and it might, or it would always prompt for a passphrase. And so because we want to avoid that, we are authorizing our public key so that we basically bypass this passphrase request moving forward, and that we don't even have to deal with it. And so once you punch that in, as you can see here for me, it's authorized, or well, this guy would be authorized, and the same can be said for your ID underscore RSA that pub key as well. Great. So far we've only done, if we take a step back, we've only done what is necessary to get Hadoop ready. We haven't actually installed Hadoop. So just to recap so far, we've installed Homebrew, which is basically something that installs Hadoop. And then we've authorized a secure, or we set up a secure shell so that Hadoop can later not have any roadblocks to establishing a connection. I know a lot going on here to even get Hadoop underway, but these are the baby steps towards something big. Um, Great. So brew install Hadoop is basically utilizing the brew is short for homebrew, and so we're utilizing the homebrew software to install. So what? Darn it. What you want to do is you want to copy this command and punch it into your terminal. And that should, yep, here we go. So it's updating our homebrew. Great, great. And so it says here that Hadoop 3.1.1 is already installed for my Mac. For you guys, you would probably not see this disclaimer or message. Um, I'm not going to reinstall it because I don't want it to overwrite any of my configuration files. Um, so yeah, I'm going to skip this step. And so if we've done it correctly, how we boot up Hadoop, let me write it here, is that you want to change your directory to the sbin directory. And so I believe what I did was the tutorial by Isaac down here is a little outdated. As you can see here, he has 2.8.0 as his Hadoop version, but for us, we have the 3.1.1 version, right? So it's going to be a little different here. And I'll change it when I'm down here. So what you want to do is, and for new terminal users, what you have to do is you can't just highlight everything. You have to use the left arrow button to delete things. So you want to backspace around here, 3.1.1. So hopefully this brings me to where I need to be. Change directory. So what we're trying to do is we're changing our directory to go here. This is basically the location in which we boot up Hadoop. Great. So, okay, cool. So I believe there's a specific command in which we need to run to boot up Hadoop. Install, we've done that. And here we go. So this is how we start off the Hadoop software. Great. So it's starting name nodes on localhost. Great. So this isn't an error message that would prevent us from allowing a Hadoop to be working. I've seen this message multiple times. So this is the localhost that Isaac recommends we punch into our browser, and it should hypothetically provide you a Hadoop connection. But when I tried it, it didn't work. And so I did a little bit of digging online, and on Stack Overflow, I found that this connection port isn't correct. And so the correct one, I believe that I just bookmarked it because it's just easier. And so um, this is the link that you guys will want. So I'm just gonna put it here. And this will be this will all be in the recording, so you guys don't have to freak out. So as you can see here, Hadoop is running. It's is working. As you can see, it's active. Um, yeah, so that's how you set up Hadoop. So I did skip a few big steps, which I'll cover in another video. But basically, um, there was a portion in which we had to go through a bunch of um, Hadoop files which we installed, and we had to change some lettering, or I guess um, we had to change some of the files within the Hadoop uh, directory, and so I'll do that in another video. But that's once you once you figure out, or once you change the um, configuration files, you'll be able to launch Hadoop similarly to how I did it. So at the end of the guide, you'll see that his page is more or less similar to my page right here. Okay, great. That's it for now.